No wife, no kids, no life. That's how my brother's family greeted me this Christmas. Oh, and they also made sure to take my savings. Just a waste of space, they said. They all nodded. I smiled and walked out. 3 days later, my voicemail was full of desperate pleas. I never thought I'd be posting on here, but after what went down at our family Christmas, I have to get this off my chest. Fair warning, this might take a while, but I'm still processing it all. You know that feeling when you walk into a room and suddenly everything goes quiet? That's exactly how my Christmas morning started. I showed up at my mum's house at 10 a.m. sharp, just like she asked me to, but when I walked in, it was like I was the last to arrive at a party that had been going on for hours. The tree, already surrounded by open gifts. Breakfast dishes were being cleared, and my brother Andrew's son Christian was already knee-deep in his new gaming setup. That's when the first red flag went up. They didn't wait for me, even though Mum specifically told them to. This was the first Christmas without Dad, who passed away in October, so I was already feeling off kilter. Mum greeted me with a tight hug, but her smile was strained, like she was holding back something. My sister-in-law, Gabriella, barely looked up from her phone. She just muttered, "Oh, you made it," like I was some kind of distant acquaintance who'd barged in. I set my gifts down by the tree, trying to ignore the awkwardness. But then there was Christian. Thankfully, he was still happy to see me, showing me his new gaming setup with that big, excited grin of his. That kid's always been a bright spot. But of course, Andrew had to interrupt. Don't bother Uncle Dominic, he probably doesn't get these things anyway. Too busy with his... whatever it is he does. The jab wasn't even subtle. Now, I've done well for myself. I work remotely for a tech company, while travelling, living my own life. What I want is mine to choose, right? Dad always supported my choices, even when they didn't match the traditional path Andrew took. But since Dad's passing, the comments about my lifestyle have been getting sharper and more frequent. Things really went off the rails during lunch. Mum made Dad's traditional Christmas roast, the first time since he passed, and it was like the entire room could feel the hole he left. Everyone was unnervingly quiet until Gabriella decided to break the silence. "So Dominic, any special someone in your life yet?" she asked, barely looking up from her phone. "You know, at your age, you really should be thinking about settling down. Christian needs cousins his age." Before I could even answer, Andrew jumped in. "Oh, he's too busy living the bachelor life. No wife, no kids, no real life, right?" He laughed, but there was something biting in it. The way the others nodded or looked away told me that they've been talking about me behind my back. I tried to stay calm, focused on my food, but it stung. The thing is, my life is full. I'm happy with my choices. "Full of what?" Gabriella pressed, setting down her fork like she was making a point. "Working all day behind a screen, bouncing between empty hotel rooms. That's not living, that's just existing. You're wasting your potential." My voice snapped out before I could catch it. "Don't ever tell me what Dad would have wanted." The table went cold. You could feel the tension hanging in the air, thick enough to cut with a knife. Mum tried to steer the conversation elsewhere, asking about New Year's plans, but Andrew wasn't done. "No," he said, leaning forward, his voice dropping low like he was about to drop some truth bomb. "We need to talk about this. The will reading is next week, and we all need to be realistic here. You've got all this money saved up, no responsibilities, while we're trying to give Christian the best life possible. It's not fair." Fair? That's when I saw it. Guilt on Mum's face. She wouldn't meet my eyes. "What do you mean we need to be realistic?" I asked, though by now I was starting to put the pieces together. Gabriella, sweet as ever, jumped in with her sugar-coated tone. "We've had some expenses, Dominic. Christian's private school, the house renovations Dad promised to help with before he... you know." She let the silence linger. "We had to borrow against what we knew was coming from the will." My stomach dropped. "Borrow from where?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. The silence that followed was deafening, suffocating. Finally, Mum spoke, her voice barely audible, like she was confessing to something terrible. "Your portion, honey. We needed it. You have so much saved already, and they have a family to think about." It felt like I'd been punched in the gut. You took money from my inheritance without asking me. Borrowed, Andrew corrected, as though that made it any better. And honestly, what were you going to do with it anyway? You're just a waste of space in this family. No real connections, no one depending on you. You're just floating through life while the rest of us have real responsibilities. Everyone nodded. Even Mum, though it was clear it was killing her inside. The only one who looked uncomfortable was Christian, who had stopped eating and was staring at his plate like he couldn't figure out what just happened. I stood up slowly. The scraping of my chair against the floor echoed through the silence. The room waited, holding its breath, probably expecting an explosion. Instead, I smiled. "Thank you for lunch, Mum. I need to go." "Oh, don't be dramatic," Gabriella sneered, but I was already walking out, head held high. Behind me, I heard Andrew mutter something about me always running away from confrontation. But it didn't matter. I was done. I drove home in a daze, my head swirling, with everything that had just happened. By the time I pulled into my parking spot, my phone was buzzing like crazy. Mostly texts from Mum, begging me to come back and talk things through as a family. And one from Andrew telling me to man up and face reality. I haven't responded to any of them. Instead, I called Dad's lawyer, Mr. Wilson, and left a message. Tomorrow I was going to find out exactly what they meant by borrowing from my inheritance. The worst part, I can't stop thinking about Dad's last conversation with me, just a week before he passed. He made me promise to take care of the family, but also to stand my ground. At the time, I thought it was just rambling from the medication, but now, I'm wondering if he knew. If he knew something like this was going to happen. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, but I do know this. I can't let this slide. Not just for the money, but for everything it represents. They want to talk about real life and responsibilities? Fine, let's talk. My phone's still buzzing. I think I'll let it ring for a while longer. Update. First off, thank you all for the overwhelming support on my last post. I wasn't expecting this many messages, but honestly, it's been a huge help as I process everything. A lot's happened in the past 48 hours, and I'm still trying to make sense of it all. What I discovered, it goes deeper than I ever thought. Yesterday I met with Dad's lawyer, Mr. Wilson. He didn't even look surprised to see me, which was my first clue something wasn't right. "I've been expecting your call," he said, pulling out a thick folder. "Your father left specific instructions about this situation." Turns out Dad knew. He knew everything. The meeting started with Mr. Wilson showing me a series of loan documents, each one with my name on it. My signature had been forged on at least 6 different papers over the last year. Every single one was used to withdraw money from my portion of the inheritance, which Dad had set up in a trust. The total amount? Over $285,000. I felt sick. Looking at those documents, those forgeries, made me want to scream. They weren't even good forgeries. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Mr. Wilson pulled out another document, a new will, dated just 2 weeks before Dad passed. "Your father amended this after a very concerning conversation with your brother," he explained, his tone serious. Then he slid over a stack of bank statements. I didn't even need to look at the numbers to know what was coming. Andrew and Gabriella, they're broke. Not just struggling, drowning in debt. The private school they've been bragging about, they haven't paid tuition in months. The house renovations, mostly funded by maxed out credit cards. They've been living way beyond their means for years, using Dad's declining health as leverage to borrow money. It was like a punch to the gut. While Mr. Wilson explained this, my phone kept buzzing, non-stop. I finally checked it during a break. 27 missed calls, 15 voicemails, dozens of texts. Here are some excerpts. "Andrew, you're being selfish. Christian's future is at stake here. Gabriella, your father would be ashamed of your behaviour. Mum, please, we need to talk this through. They made mistakes, but they're family." But the most surprising? A message from Christian. "Uncle Dom, I'm sorry about Christmas. Dad and Mum were wrong to say those things. That hit hard. The kid's only 12, but it felt like he understood more than his parents ever would. Then Mr. Wilson dropped the bombshell. The amended will had specific conditions. Any money taken through unauthorised loans had to be repaid before anyone could access their full inheritance. And the best part, Dad left me in charge of overseeing the repayment plan. Your father was very clear about this, Mr. Wilson said, handing me a handwritten letter from Dad. He wrote, "Dominic understands the value of money and responsibility better than anyone gives him credit for. He'll make the right choices." Just as we were wrapping up, Mr. Wilson pulled out one last document. "There's something else you should know," he said, his voice lowering. "Your brother tried to have you declared financially irresponsible last month. He wanted control over your entire portion of the inheritance." That explained everything. The comments about my lifestyle, the digs about my career and travels, they weren't just judgmental, they were part of a strategy to build a case against me. As I left the office, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Gabriella. Her voice was shaking. "We need to talk. There are things you don't understand. The school is threatening to remove Christian if we don't pay by next week. Please, we can work something out." I sat in my car for what felt like an eternity, rereading Dad's letter. At the end, he wrote something that hit me like a ton of bricks. "Son, they'll try to use guilt. They'll call you selfish. Remember, real responsibility isn't about giving in to demands. It's about making tough choices for the right reasons." Then the next paragraph caught me off guard. "Check the garage at the old house, bottom shelf behind the paint cans. I left something there you'll need." I drove to Dad's house. Well, Mum's house now. It was empty, which was a relief. The garage was exactly as Dad had left it. Tools neatly arranged, shelves dusted, everything in its place. Behind the paint cans, I found a small fireproof safe. The combination, my birthday. Inside that there was another letter, several USB drives, and a detailed ledger of every loan Andrew had taken out over the years. Not just from my inheritance, but from Dad's too. The numbers were staggering. The letter started with, "If you're reading this, they finally pushed too far. Here's everything you need to protect yourself and make them learn." My phone buzzed again. Another text from Mum. "They're coming over tomorrow morning. Please come, we need to sort this as a family." I looked at the contents of the safe spread out on my desk, then at Dad's letter. The final line read, "Sometimes love means standing firm. You're stronger than they think you are." Tomorrow's meeting was going to be interesting. I'd made copies of everything and sent them to Mr. Wilson for safekeeping. I'm done being the family pushover, but I'm not out for revenge either. Dad trusted me to handle this right, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. The most recent text was from Christian. "Are you coming tomorrow? I hope you do. Someone needs to tell them the truth." Out of all the messages, that one hit hardest. Christian was a kid, but he was the only one in the family who seemed to get it. He wasn't blinded by greed or self-interest. That message, that's the one I was holding on to. I'll update after tomorrow's meeting. Something tells me it's going to be a turning point for all of us. Update 2. I should have known something was off when I pulled up to Mum's house this morning and saw 3 extra cars in the driveway. Andrew didn't just bring Gabriella, he'd brought reinforcements. Aunt Linda, Uncle Pete and their family friend, who just so happened to be a financial advisor, were sitting in the living room, like some sort of intervention panel. Andrew wasted no time. The first words out of his mouth set the tone. "Good, you're here. Now we can discuss how to fix the mess you're making of this family." I almost laughed. This was their play? Mum stood nervously in the kitchen doorway, clutching a tissue. Gabriella, as always, looked perfectly poised on the couch. Makeup done like she was about to close a deal in a boardroom, not face the fallout of her lies. Christian was nowhere to be seen. Probably sent to a friend's house to avoid the drama. I took Dad's old armchair by the window. Something about sitting in his spot gave me strength. I didn't say anything at first, just let the silence hang. Andrew hated silence. It made him nervous, and sure enough, he was the first to fill the void. "We've been talking," he gestured to the room. And we think you're not seeing the bigger picture here. Dad's will? It's causing unnecessary strain on all of us. We have a proposal. Their financial advisor friend pulled out some papers. That's when I noticed the logo on the top. It was from the same firm that manages the mortgage on Mum's house. Interesting. The proposal? It was exactly what you'd expect. They wanted to restructure the inheritance. Essentially, they'd get immediate access to their full portion, plus temporary control of my share to help manage family assets more efficiently. And of course, they'd set up a repayment plan for the loans, starting in 5 years. I let them finish their pitch. Then I pulled out Dad's ledger, calm but deadly serious. Before we go further, I said, let's talk about the Mountain View property. The room went dead quiet. Aunt Linda suddenly became very interested in her coffee. For those asking in the comments, the Mountain View property was Dad's rental. 3 units, fully paid off, steady income. He'd left it to Mum in his will, at least that's what everyone thought. The Mountain View property isn't relevant here, Andrew said quickly. Too quickly. I opened the ledger to a marked page. Really? Because according to this, you took out a second mortgage on it 8 months ago, using Mum's power of attorney while Dad was in the hospital. Did you tell her about that? Andrew's face drained of colour. What is he talking about? He muttered. Mum's tissue fell to the floor. It was temporary. Gabriella jumped in, her voice defensive, almost pleading. We needed capital for an investment opportunity. It's all under control. Under control? I turned to their financial advisor friend. Is that why the property is in pre-foreclosure? That's when it happened. Mum broke down, her sobs loud and raw. It wasn't the quiet, composed crying I was used to hearing from her. No, these were deep, harsh sobs that made everyone flinch, like she'd been holding it in for far too long. For the first time I felt real pity for her. But pity didn't change the facts. My units. Brooks and I bought those when we first got married. They were our retirement plan. Andrew shot me a look of pure, seething hatred. You had no right to go digging into private family matters. Private? Like forging my signature on loans, or opening 3 credit cards in Mum's name? Silence. The financial advisor began gathering his papers, clearly uncomfortable. That's different, Andrew snapped, desperation creeping into his voice. We were protecting the family's interests. You've never understood what that means. You just travel around, living without responsibilities, while we lost $500,000 in online trading. I cut in, my voice sharp. Borrowed against every asset you could find. Maxed out Christian's college fund. Suddenly Gabriella stood up, her face red with rage. You sanctimonious little... You think you're so perfect. At least we're trying to build something. What do you have? Empty apartments in different cities? Photos of places no one cares about? I have no debt, I said quietly, my words landing with weight. And I have Dad's trust. That's when a small voice piped up from the stairs. Is it true about my college fund? Everyone turned. Christian stood on the middle step, clutching his phone. He'd been listening. Honey, go to your room, Gabriella started, but Christian cut her off. I recorded everything he said. His voice was shaking from the start. Uncle Dom wasn't lying about you stealing, was he? The room erupted into chaos. Gabriella broke into tears. Andrew shouted angrily, and Mum sobbed in the corner about the Mountain View property. Aunt Linda and Uncle Pete quietly slipped out during the confusion. The financial advisor handed me his card as he left. Turns out he'd been trying to warn them about Andrew's schemes for months. In the middle of it all, Christian came and sat next to me, quietly taking the armrest of Dad's chair. It was such a small gesture, but it felt massive. After the shouting died down, I pulled out the final piece, the amended will with the repayment conditions. Here's what's going to happen, I said, voice firm and unwavering. Mountain View goes into immediate trust management to stop the foreclosure. All credit cards in Mum's name are cancelled. Christian's remaining college fund is frozen in a new account that only he can access when he turns 18. And you two, I looked pointedly at Andrew and Gabriella, start mandatory financial counselling next week. Or what? Andrew spat, his face twisted in fury. Or I take this folder of forged documents to the police. The room fell silent. Mum finally spoke, her voice rough from crying. The units. Can they be saved? Yes, I assured her. Dad left enough in the estate to cover it, but Andrew and Gabriella have to agree to the terms. All of them. I passed around copies of the repayment plan. Just as the tension reached its peak, my phone buzzed. Another text from Mr. Wilson. Your father would be proud. Meeting tomorrow to finalise everything. Before anyone could argue further, Christian spoke up, his voice steady, despite everything. Dad, just sign it, please. I don't want to have to show everyone at school what you really did. Andrew's face went ashen, his own son holding the proof of everything. Gabriella signed first, her hand trembling. Andrew followed, his hand shaking with either rage or shame. Probably both. Final update. 2 weeks have passed since the last update, and I've been waiting to post until everything was finalised. What happened wasn't just a resolution. It was the dismantling of my brother's entire facade. Some might call it karma. I call it justice. Andrew and Gabriella tried to spin the story in every direction they could. But with the evidence, the repayment plan, and the recorded confessions, their options were limited. The family, as fractured as it was, had no choice but to face the consequences of their actions. I've talked to Christian a few times since. He's staying with me for now, getting settled and trying to move forward. It's surreal to think that it was him who ultimately helped expose the truth. His quiet courage in the midst of all the chaos showed me just how much he's grown. As for Andrew and Gabriella, they're attending financial counselling and trying to clean up the mess they've made. But I'm not holding my breath. There's a lot of damage done, and that kind of thing doesn't just go away. In the end, this was never just about money. It was about protecting what was left of the family, standing firm, not letting the lies win. The morning after our family meeting, Andrew made his fatal mistake. In a last-ditch effort to gain control, he tried to empty Mum's accounts, all of them. What he didn't realise was that I'd already frozen everything the night before. His attempted theft triggered exactly what I'd hoped for, an automatic fraud alert and an immediate investigation. Here's where Dad's foresight really shines. Those USB drives Dad left in the garage safe, they contained years of recorded conversations, every loan request, every lie, every manipulation. The last recording? Andrew in a panic, trying to get Dad to sign over power of attorney while he was heavily medicated in the hospital. Mr. Wilson helped me execute the plan flawlessly. First, we submitted all the evidence of the forged signatures to the authorities. Then we exposed the credit card fraud. The look on Andrew's face when the investigators showed up at his office was apparently priceless. One of his colleagues even emailed me the security footage. As expected, Gabriella tried damage control, calling everyone in their social circle, spinning a story about how I was destroying the family. But remember the financial advisor from our last meeting? He had his own files on Andrew and Gabriella's schemes. When he presented evidence of their small investment scam, their friends turned on them faster than sharks smelling blood in the water. Christian, my brave nephew, had one more trick up his sleeve. He forwarded all of his recordings to the school board. Not only did they grant him emergency financial aid, but they also opened an investigation into the donations Andrew and Gabriella had been claiming on their taxes. Spoiler alert, those donations never existed. Mum finally saw their true colours when Andrew, in desperation, tried to pin everything on her. He claimed she had authorised all the loans and credit cards. That's when I played my trump card, Dad's final video message, recorded just a week before he passed. In it, he detailed exactly how Andrew had manipulated and stolen from both our parents for years. The Mountain View property? Saved and restructured. Mum's retirement? Secured. Christian's college fund? Not only recovered but tripled, thanks to Dad's secret investment account that Andrew never knew about. It had been earmarked specifically for Christian since he was born, but the real satisfaction came from an unexpected source. Remember Aunt Linda, the one who sat silently during our family meeting? She finally came clean about why she'd protected Andrew for so long. He'd been blackmailing her with fabricated evidence of tax fraud. When we exposed that lie, she handed over years of emails, showing how Andrew had systematically manipulated every family member. The dominoes fell beautifully. Andrew's firm suspended him pending investigation. Their country club membership revoked. Turns out they'd been charging thousands to other members' accounts. And their dream house? In foreclosure. Their entire social circle ostracised them, and 3 of their friends filed lawsuits over the investment scam. Gabriella's final attempt at redemption. It backfired spectacularly. She tried to hold a press conference to paint herself as a victim of circumstances. But Christian, in a move that could only be described as genius, released the group chat screenshots showing her actively planning to exploit more family members. That was the nail in the coffin. Next week, Andrew and Gabriella will be moving out of their house and downsizing to a small apartment across town. Christian has chosen to stay with me temporarily, with full legal backing. Thanks to Mr. Wilson's connections, the court was particularly interested in the recording of Andrew threatening to make Christian pay for exposing their schemes. It was the final nail in their coffin. Mum is doing better now. Yesterday she helped me sort through Dad's old office and found a letter he'd written to me years ago. It said, "Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for someone is let them face the consequences of their actions. Rock bottom has a way of building foundations for better things." The family dynamics have shifted permanently. Most relatives have cut ties with Andrew and Gabriella. Those who haven't are keeping their distance. Mum now hosts Sunday dinners, smaller, quieter affairs without the cloud of manipulation hanging over them. The real victory, though, is Christian's transformation. Free from his parents' influence, he's thriving. His grades are up, he's making genuine friends. And just yesterday he told me he wants to study finance, to help people, not hurt them, as he put it. As for me, I've bought the Mountain View property from Mum at full market value. Everything legitimate and documented. I'm converting it into affordable housing units with a strict policy that neither Andrew nor Gabriella will ever be allowed to rent there. Petty? Maybe. Satisfying? Absolutely. Dad's final message keeps playing in my mind. Son, sometimes love means watching someone lose everything they stole so they can find something real to build on. Andrew and Gabriella are facing multiple investigations, civil lawsuits, and complete social isolation. The house of cards didn't just fall, it burned, and I made sure to document every moment of its collapse. The family thinks I'm done. They're wrong. I've set up a trust fund for Christian that Andrew and Gabriella can never touch, even after he turns 18. Every penny they stole will be repaid with interest through wage garnishment, if necessary. Their reputation in this town is destroyed, not through rumours or lies, but through the simple exposure of their own actions. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just watching someone fall, it's making sure they can never rebuild their facade again. Christian's staying with me through the school year. Last night he asked if we could frame Dad's last letter in his new room. He said it would remind him that doing the right thing matters more than looking right. Seems like Dad's legacy will live on after all. Not through the son he was expected to choose, but through the one he helped save.